All right.
Great. So yeah, thanks for coming. We have some guests in line and someone in the room, or some people in the room.
Okay.
And so we have Anna Vesic, who literally just defended her master's. So congrats on that one. And then also we have Ambika, and they are both from our department, kind of artifact-based computing and user research. And yeah, they'll be talking about doing user research actually. And some of their best practices in doing this. So yeah, the stage is yours.
Okay, thanks. So I can stand here, so yeah,
Yes,
that's all right.
okay.
So as you know already, the topic, so it's designing and executing user studies, and we'll talk actually about the best practices for responsible computing. So this is the timeline. I will talk about something that is very related and very key for responsible research and innovation, or actually for the responsible computing. Then we will talk about in general about the user studies. How do you design a user study? What is helpful, like what you should actually do, and some tips and tricks on how to make it better. Then we will talk about, so first before what you should do, and then what you should do when designing. Then we will talk about the use cases about conducting certain user studies. We will talk about the key learning outcomes of the user studies, and then we'll talk about the lessons learned throughout our practice. So what is actually responsible computing? I don't know if this should be interactive or not, but if anyone has any idea, what would you say is the responsible computing? Do you have any idea what could that be?
Putting the user and the ethical considerations and needs of them in the center of what you are doing when designing computing interactions.
Yes, that's exactly that. And to help us to put I don't know if the audio is well enough. So in order to actually put the user in the center and conduct the research ethically, and to take everyone that we should take into consideration, we can use something that is called responsible research and innovation. This is a QR code, and this is actually the website that you can go to in order to use the tools that you can use. And we will talk about what this is and the guidelines of the responsible research and innovation. So this is actually a term used by European Union's framework programs, and it is referred to scientific research and technology development that consider the actual and prospective repercussions on society and the environment. So this is something that is basically mandatory to be done within the EU, or I mean, it's not mandatory, it's very advisable in order for your research to be accepted, to get funded, to be actually acknowledged. So this was there, I think also, okay. These are the measures of responsible research and innovation. So first we can talk about, so I will just read it through, and then I will summarize all of these together. So we have public engagement, we have ethics, gender equality, science and education, open access, and governance. So what is important here? It's important to actually take everyone into consideration, depending on what you're doing, what kind of product you're developing. If you're developing a product that is for wide usage, such as mobile phones, then you have to respect the gender equality, but not just the gender equality in general, for example, race equality as well. An interesting example is actually the face recognition. In the beginning of the days was actually that people of darker skin colors could not get their face properly recognized each time, whereas white males were absolutely perfectly recognized each time. And this is the bias that we have while making our products. So if I'm a white female, I will have biases for my needs. I will have biases when testing and developing a product. This actually happened in my master's thesis now, also in my project in the beginning. I was making the app and testing it with my hand. I will talk later about it. And then when I tested it with other people, it was not very precise. So even though we don't have maybe some inherent phobias, I mean, like racism or chauvinism in ourselves, it's the biases that we naturally have. So what is important is to actually consider everyone or the people that we are making the product or the research for. It is also important to have the public engaged in the sense that we need to publish our findings very transparently, all the limitations of our work, all the limitations of what our findings and what we did during our study. And we need to actually learn also from the public. Then, of course, the ethics. So it is very important to consider the impacts on the society and the environment, impacts on the people. So this equality is tied to that. In general, what I would just sum up with the rest of the three is that we need to make the findings accessible to everyone. We need to be transparent and to implement policies and practices that would actually support this responsible research and innovation. We need to be accountable for what we do and to hold ourselves accountable and our colleagues. This is the QR code I was looking for. You can find this in Austria if you're doing any type of research or similar. You can also check this website. It's basically on the same topic about responsible research and innovation. So why is this important actually is that if we want to make our product usable and our research meaningful, we need to consider the people and we need to be transparent and meaningful about our work. Otherwise, it is just something that we've done. No one is going to use it, or the people we made it for will not use it, and it's just wasted work actually. On the most selfish side, so to say. Yes. So now we're done with the responsible computing, and we are now focusing on how to actually do this. So how to do a user study and how to design. So when we are designing and before we start literally designing the user study that we're going to do, we need to first of all define the problem that we want to solve. So even before going to this RRI dimensions, we first define the problem that we want to solve. Then we consider what is our target group, who are the people that we are trying to target with our solution, how this problem affects them and how our solution should affect them, and what are their needs actually. Then we should also consider all the different stakeholders in this topic. We want to consider the impact that we want to have, and then to relate this impact on the realistic impact that we'll have on our target group. So maybe we think, I will make this example, as I said, of push counter for wheelchair users. So what I did is that with my team, we tried to design something for wheelchair users, and that was like a wearable device that they can put on their wheelchair and to measure actually their physical activity. So it is as a step counter, and we first named it a step counter, which is ridiculous. And in this first step is actually, wow, how can they relate to this product? That's the first thing. Why would they even consider using it when it's so ignorant from our side, right? So this is the first thing that we did. Then we said, okay, as physical activity for them, we'll just do push counter. Okay, but pushing is not just physical activity for them. Depending, of course, also in these cases, for example, accessibility and people with special needs, you have to actually consider the level of their impairment. And for example, some people cannot move at all, some people can. And then what we decided is to target a specific group that can actually do certain things, that are able to do more things. So what we also incorporated then was actually meaningful physical activity, that they actually also have to do certain physical exercises up to a certain point. They can move this wearable device to for example, some people cannot move at all, some people can. This way, okay. So they can also put it on their hand, and this was actually important because once we dive more into this topic, is they have these certain sore spots or pressure spots, which are then pretty dangerous sometimes if they're sitting for too long, and then they can by moving just a little bit or doing some meaningful activity, this can be prevented. But what I want to say is then you know what you want, then you have to relate about the impact on them and their needs, and then you should involve the stakeholders. How can we, who are completely able, even meet their needs and know what their needs are? So this is where the stakeholders come in. Then you think about maybe some NGOs that are dealing with promotion of people with special needs. They have, for example, the target group, they're connected with this group of people, etc. So then you can actually know more, you can promote your work, you can recruit the users, you can recruit the participants, etc. So this is where the stakeholders come in. I think it's crucial.
Just a moment.
Yes.
Good.
It's on the Zoom share button.
Is there?
Yeah.
Yes. It's sharing.
You're sharing this.
It is,
Because that's what I checked, the slides. didn't
like it shows
actually
this.
were
Yeah, now it should be
showing
fine.
on screen, that's why
Yeah, okay,
I
okay.
quickly checked.
Is it okay now?
Yes, it should be okay. Okay.
All right.
But we still don't see it in.
Yeah, there is a delay.
In full screen? Uh-huh.
It says you're sharing the screen. I don't know.
In a second, maybe.
So maybe I'm also not online.
Maybe we should share the application or something.
No, it's
Now it was.
Now it's
Okay.
shared.
very delay.
Sorry for that.
All right. Okay. And so now the user study, when we did this before the user study, so we defined our problem, we defined our target group, we defined our stakeholders, who can help us, who can fund us, who can give us more knowledge, who can connect us with our users. We are now going to the user study and designing our user study very specifically. No, it's
Right.
Okay,
Very good.
we'll just do it like this, yeah? Okay, great. So before starting, as we said, determine your topic and goal, and then pose the research questions that you want. So kind of you gathered some knowledge, you maybe redefined your problem statement, and now actually want to see the research questions that you need. So if you're designing your product, you actually have certain questions that you need answers to in order to refine your idea and make the product as best as you can. These research questions should be answered through your user study. So yes. Then you decide the methodologies which you will use to answer each of the research questions. So quantitative and qualitative data, and so prepare interview and survey questions. Interview is qualitative data. I don't know the background of everyone. So qualitative data can be, for example, interview, observations, some diary, autoethnography, etc. And survey questions is something more quantitative, which you can actually, by scoring, you can measure and do some certain statistical analysis of it. So it's, for example, from 1 to 5, how you feel, yes, no, etc. And then you determine the data collection and storing. This is actually very important because how you're gonna collect the data, so through these methodologies, and then is it going to be, if it's a video, how you're gonna do it? Is it gonna be through a computer? Is it gonna be through a camera? It's very important that for storing later analysis, you need to decide if you're gonna store it on the device, then you need to actually take care if this device has enough memory. I know this is something basic, but when you are in this situation, it is crucial because once this participant is gone, he's gone. Like you don't have this data anymore. And this is why it's really crucial to think about this in advance and always have backup. So do it on the cloud, do it locally, have an external storage. Then you will maybe go to your parents' place and be like, yeah, I'm gonna work now a little bit, and you don't have the data. So have as much data places where you store your data as possible. After you do all of this, so you decide on your methodologies, you make your interview and survey questions. What you need to do is to prepare the consent form, the experiment guide, which includes the interview guide. You also think about the participants, so instructions for the participants, when to come, how to arrive there, what they should expect, because anxiety sometimes can be high in them. They're anticipating something, they don't know what. You don't need this interference in your data points. And then you put out a call for participants. Once all of this is done, then you do the call for participants, in which you will include instructions, etc. Why is consent form important? First of all, people need to know what they're doing, so they're not confused. So you have the base data possible and what they are giving. So are they giving personal information? Are they giving their face out? What you're going to do with this data? Are you going to publish it? Is it important for them to give you your name and relate it to their face or not? Usually not. But it's very important to tell them very straightforward, I will not be using your personal data, your face will be blurred, no one will know that you were ever here. Why is this important for you? It's in order for your results to be published and not taken down. You publish a paper, someone will say, hey, you used my data, didn't consent, you have to take that down. And then the entire community suffers because your findings are then just sitting in a basement. What should a consent form contain? So just a brief description of the study, what data will be collected, how will it be stored, how will it be saved, so the confidentiality, will you share it with someone, that they're doing this voluntarily, so no one pressured them into this. And for that, you need participant signature or actually giving any type of consent. Maybe you're doing an interview, it's also enough for them to say, are you consenting to this interview? I'm consenting to this interview, and you record that. But always have it in paper as well, it's much better. And why is the interview guide important? You need to have the plan of the study for yourself. So each of the experiments and each of the participants have the same experiment, so the data is consistent, so your findings can be actually consistent. And it's important for you to know what you're doing so you don't miss any step. It's always good to keep track, and you have the checkpoints, like is something done and something, or if you missed it, then you know what you missed it and how to treat this data. And in this experiment guide, have an interview guide, so you can consistently collect and compare data. So you always ask the same questions so you can compare it. I would actually hand out the consent form and experiment guide if you want to see. Experiment guide here has many pages because the study was long, but it has 2 pages, you can see it. Yes, so experiment guide, just what you will say, what you should do, and the questions. This is what I already said, so I will maybe speed up a little bit. I will talk briefly about my user case now. So the topic was analysis of the learning curve. What has the most positive influence in learning a new motor skill? What type of feedback? Is it audio, visual, or is it gamified feedback? I first finished the software development before I designed the user study. And this is where I said my hand was, I made a bias because my hand was perfectly scored, while in other people, sometimes not perfectly. This can then lead to frustration. This can lead them to compromising of your data because they're frustrated for no reason. And it's not the point of your study to find out if gamification can cause frustration and how that impacts the study, but to compare different modes of feedback in perfect conditions. What actually the game was is we had a hand choreography, single hand choreography, and people should actually follow along the little images on the bottom of the screen. And they had positive and negative feedback. This was a positive feedback. They did it correctly, so they had a little firework. And yes, these were just my consent form. This is, for example, the instruction, where to go, put everywhere up. This is how it looked like. This is one condition where they learn only with video, and this is a free learning where they could choose what they're going to learn with and how. So they've developed their own strategy. So these are 2 different conditions in my study. And so we had 5 groups. First group learned only with video, so they were looking at the choreography and they were trying to learn it just through video. The second group had the same video with audio instructions over it, so move finger, bring finger down, open palm, etc. Gamification explained right away. The fourth one, they learned with video on the first day, so the same as the first group, and with gamification as the third group. So this is a combination of these two groups. And the free learning, they could choose whichever way they wanted to learn with and develop their own strategy. So the user study was intended to have 55 participants in 5 groups, 11 per group, but I will talk about my mistake. It was a between group study, which means that each participant participated only in one group and learned only with one mode of feedback. It was an extended study, 2 days, 30 minutes each day. And I will just briefly go through how it looked like. So on the first day, we had an informative interview to know their background and experience. Then we had 3 iterations of learning in slow pace. We had a first test, again 3 iterations and a slow test, and we can see which surveys I administered. On the second day, we started with a test to see how much they remember from the previous day. And then we learned with normal pace, so double the speed, 6 iterations, a test, 6 iterations, a test. And then the last short iteration of just 3 times learning and then a test. And the key findings of this were actually that the multimodal feedback, so audio and video together, yielded the best results. It was expected that gamification would have the best results actually, but it turned out that gamification modes had by far the worst performance. The video only, so the unimodal feedback was kind of a balance, so somewhere in between. Gamification was just too early included in the learning process. That was the main conclusion. So and those who actually learned with gamification only, so both in the first and the second day, had a little bit better performance than those who included gamification on the second day. When you're thinking about learning a new skill, you usually think about, I will start learning traditionally, for example, with video, and then I will expedite it with something fun, for example, a game. However, this came too early. Participants said they would actually participate, they would use a game in their learning process, but later in the learning process. And by far the greatest enjoyment rates were experienced in free learning, of course, due to the freedom that they had, but also in audio was experienced enjoyment due to their good performance, which motivated them. And yes, these are the findings for my study. I would just like to say limitations. My limitations were that I made a mistake, where in the video condition, I accidentally, instead of 11 people, I had 9. And those 2 people that I missed in video, even though I wrote it on the paper that it was a video condition, I gave them gamification. So gamification had 2 more people than it should have had. The rest was actually balanced. They all had 11 as they should. And what I would like to say is always check, but I think we're talking about it at the end. So I just wanted to point my limitation, and I will now move back to you. Thank you.
This is yeah. Thank you, Anna, for explaining the basics of user study and how to conduct them ethically and with more accountability. I would also want to highlight some points that I took care of during my user studies, which were more specific to, let's say, human body and actuators and sensors on human body. When you have something that's on or very close to the participant's body, you have to make sure that you are following more ethical guidelines and you're making sure their safety and security. And I would start with, I'll call it my control work. So studies that have bodily control on it. As you can see in the figure here, I used something called as electrical muscle stimulation along with some of my colleagues and students. Electrical muscle stimulation is basically an off-the-shelf device that is practically used in rehabilitation practices, where if someone has a stroke or an impairment, medical practitioners or physiotherapists put electrodes on the muscles to strengthen those muscles. And we were looking at the practical use of them for VR, AR learning experiences, because it's kind of bypassing the signal that your brain sends to your muscle, so it makes your body move. So you can give a lot of force feedback or a sense of haptic sensation, or like you're lifting something in VR using this technology. And we did it on an example of floor lamination tutorial. So we created a step-by-step guide using HoloLens, so an augmented reality guide, to teach someone how to learn a skill of floor lamination. And we used electrical muscle stimulation to give some physical feedback, like how to place your body, where to put the objects, give this sensation of when they say the next step is to hammer something together, the system moves their arm and shows them the movement that they have to do. So it's very involuntary in nature because it's bypassing the signal that your brain sends. So it's just an external simulation. It feels a little bit alien when you try it for the first time because you don't have the intention to move a certain part of your body, but the system moves your body. And for this particular experiment, we took care of the ethics. So we had like an internal meeting together of how to create a more ethical environment, how to make sure that we are recruiting people who don't have a pacemaker or some kind of, or are not pregnant or don't have any physical challenges that the EMS system can affect severely. We took care of the calibration. So these systems were calibrated specifically for the participants before the study. We spent around 15 minutes calibrating it correctly so it's comfortable and causing the correct movement. And when you are designing for systems that can affect your body physically, these are the things that you have to take care of, making it safe for the participants, making it voluntary for the participants, making it comfortable, making them aware of the risks, and making them aware of how the system works. Here we used an off-the-shelf device. So one you can buy, a medical practitioner, anyone can buy from a pharmacy or a store. And we just added a microcontroller and some relays to control an existing system, which was in a way easier to deal with, because then if you create your own hardware, so to say, or your own circuit, it's more challenging to have the ethical approval. So we bypassed that through using an off-the-shelf device. Similarly, the another.
We have to click it.
Okay. Yeah, the other two case studies that I want to talk about also goes back to the points in the beginning that Anna discussed about the stakeholders and about testing the systems with whom you're designing for and making sure the systems are as close to their reality and as close to as their personal experiences and what they have to learn. So here, the first case study we did with our colleagues from AIT and colleagues from Upper Austria, universities of Upper Austria, is called a medical trolley scenario, where we were planning to create an AR simulation for teaching medical students, especially nurses, how to set up a surgery trolley before a surgery. As it's a very challenging task and it has 12 to 15 steps, and you have to remember all the steps and place the objects at the right place so that you can hand it to the doctor at the right time. A lot of nurses and students don't get to practice it very frequently at a student level. And we created a VR scenario where they could practice it with, you can see there are the controllers that vibrate if you do something wrong. They guide you in the right direction, where to put what, and the whole VR simulation you can practice over and over. We did involve all the stakeholders and we did test the system with 20 nurses. Some of them were underaged or students, so we made sure that we take the consent from their parents. So you also have to take care of who's consenting, their age, their demographics, and making sure that you really run the studies with the potential users of your system. In the second case study, which was also for medical practitioners, is the emergency evacuation and emergency information about the building for healthcare responders. And we went to the place, we tried to replicate in our VR exactly the same hospital scenario. So the doors, the rooms, the floor, they are a one-on-one match to our VR scenarios, and they could learn the room numbers, and we had different modalities to test how their memory is and the accuracy of evacuation. And we also tested this with our potential users, so medical practitioners and nurses. And it's very important, I would like to highlight again, That's very important to make sure that you involve the stakeholders and you involve the people you're designing for.
Okay. I would say, yeah, definitely to be transparent. So before doing the study, as Ambika now said, with the people, but also after the study. So when you're publishing your work, all the limitations of what you did. You should always obtain written consent. As I said, sometimes in interviews you can record it, but it's always better to have a written consent. And for the study itself, you need a written consent. This was just for the interview. Respect participants' privacy, always anonymize the data, always be ethical in designing, and really just try to identify all of the risks for the participants in general and try to take the steps in order to avoid that. And just, we talked about, so everything here, I think we said it, everything. Just be clear about your findings and be open about it. Oops. So this is why this kind of approach brings clear and systematic research on different topics and setting standards for, so to say, real science, in the sense that we're not just publishing for publishing and everyone publishes all kinds of different work, but science is actually that is something exact, and that it should be very systematized and very standardized so that we have consistent conclusions and results. Lessons learned and advice that we wanted to give. So this is what I started, but then I said I will talk about it later. Try always to have more participants than you need, because sometimes someone will just not appear. Sometimes you will make a mistake, as I did, for example, and then you have more participants in one group than in the other, or whatever it may happen. Check your data every day, check if you did everything correctly, check your experiment guide if something is missing or not missing. Maybe you can then either recruit this additional participants instead of the previous one, or call the previous one, or whatever. It is good to work in teams, and to have at least one person to check if you did stuff correctly or not, if you missed something. When you're alone, you have many things to do, mistakes can happen very easily. Always, as I said, keep the backup. And have more time. Try to do a pre-study, for example. You think you did something, you designed everything right, and then you start doing the study and you're like, no, this is actually not working out. So try to have pre-study. This also goes for the more participants. Then see if this makes sense. If it makes sense, then you can just proceed. If not, you correct the stuff and then you move on to the real study. Yes. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, first of all, thank you. So yeah, if you have time, I know you are kind of on the run in a way. If you could take one or two questions.
Yeah.
Any questions in the room? Otherwise, I'll have one. Or online, I need to check as well. I think it's just because of the slides. Yes, okay. So my question is now actually, so from what I understood, you kind of you went in, you did your kind of research, and you came across all these kind of issues, right? And so in particular, the kind of the ethics of running the research, like what's the kind of state of the literature, basically? I mean, like if I look at now the AI and ethic literature, there's always this kind of values, it should be transparent, accountable, and so on. But in practical terms, nobody really knows what to do with it. So in your experience, what's kind of the state of the user research ethics, literature? Like how far are we away from having actually kind of, very practical guidelines that anyone can apply, or do researchers mostly still have to just, kind of go and try out and see, where problems appear?
Yeah, with AI ethics and AI research, it is very challenging because AI is a very fast evolving field, and there's something coming up every day, and the policymakers cannot keep up with the pace at which AI is evolving, and there are these policy vacuums. And it is always challenging when you're working with AI. But if you're doing a user study which does not involve AI, or like just a regular user study with some prototype, there is like a set protocol, for example, involving different stakeholders from varied background, ethnicity, making sure that you're inclusive. Making sure that you take informed consent, you inform the participant what kind of data you're collecting, anonymizing the data, making sure when you're storing the data, you follow a certain format and that the identity is not revealed. If you're dealing with participants who are vulnerable, for example, if you're dealing with age group 7 to 10, you make sure that you do a sensitivity check of all your documents. You make sure that you get it checked. You work in groups and you get it checked from some expert. You involve some expert from the field or like some pedagogy person. So having a different stakeholder portfolio, and then also reporting results with more accountability. So that there are kind of a set guidelines to do user study.
So there's basically already some sort of framework that you can work with from.
Yeah, I think so. It's also important to have, as we said in the RRI, the dimensions, this gender equality, what you mentioned, to have very equally distributed race, gender, etc. Also for the purpose of the quality of your findings, but also in general background. So if you have a group, for example, in my study, if I had a group that were doing instrument playing for 10 years and I put all of them in one group, it would not be equally distributed, would not be realistic because they have advantage probably over the others.
Also, universities have their ethical committees,
Right, yeah.
and it's advised that whenever you're doing experiment design, you send all your documents and you send your evaluation plan and everything to the ethical committee and have a presentation and seek an ethical approval, especially when you're designing systems with like muscle actuation or different kinds of actuators that have major impact on the physical body.
And actually, TUBIN is kind of a prime example of having those committees, because we only recently established our own dedicated committee with Mayo and the others. So TUBIN in that regard takes on responsibility already.
Yeah.
Dedicated to informatics or?
No, dedicated to the whole university, I think.
Yeah, okay.
And other universities don't, but TUBIN kind of takes a leading role in that regard.
Yes.
Yeah, and in your experience, because I mean, we did it in kind of terrorism, and so our biggest problem was that you don't have a person in the committee that's an expert on the issue. And so I was wondering whether in the committee, maybe at TUBIN, if you have an expert on user research in kind of available in a way that they actually understand, or whether it is usually somebody who is not that familiar exactly, might be informatics, but like